An insect symbiote can stop deadly human diseases?
What do you mean I can't do my own stunts just because sparks are flying?
Those topics and more on this week's BioTrekkie with the Admiral, starting now. Hello, my name is Mohamed Noor. I'm a biology professor at Duke University, and I'm an occasional science consultant for the Star Trek universe. Welcome to BioTrekkie with the Admiral. Here's my co-host, Jayne Brook.
Yeah, I'm Jayne Brook, and I played Admiral Katrina Cornwell in the first 2 seasons of Discovery. And I am here today as Mohamed's friend and enthusiastic student who is looking forward to learning more about biology here on Earth through the lens of Star Trek. So today we're going to be talking about episodes 2 and 3 in Discovery's 3rd season. And Mohamed, kicking it off right to you, in those episodes, can you tell us a few things that really jumped out at you that you can discuss with us?
Sure thing.
You can summarize it and then we'll circle back to the individual points.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So for me, the second episode, one thing that jumped out to me, besides the parasitic ice, which I'm not going to talk about, something was given to Tilly and Saru to help them breathe on that planet that they were on. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it's interesting to speculate on it, and specifically in the context of like real world human adaptations to low oxygen environments, because I'm assuming it had something to do with oxygen, since there was a comment about oxygen earlier, which I'll elaborate on in a minute. So that's the first one. Second one, in the 3rd episode, it was really cool to see them reintroduce a familiar Trek alien. These are the Trill, and specifically how they have these symbioses. Like it looks like a giant slug that's somehow inserted into their gut. But it's fun, again, just to think about symbiotic relationships in the real world. So we can talk a little bit about that. And then finally, also in that 3rd episode, it was really cool to see that giant old tree. It's been there for 930 years at least, probably longer than that. I assume it wasn't a little seedling when they first saw it.
Right. It's cool because those things jumped out to me as well. When Saru and Tilly were standing at the doorway in that 2nd episode and the doors opened and they were about to step out, I remember thinking, whoa, how are they going to breathe? So that's cool. And the tree definitely jumped out at me and the idea of symbiosis. So let's go back to that first one. The idea of adaptations, et cetera. Could you tell us more about the connection to human adaptations at elevation? And yeah.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So in that episode, Tilly said that there were these pockets, and she mentioned the shape. I think she said they were decagons or something, where the oxygen was higher than in other places. And Saru said, I wrote it down here, we will have Dr. Pollard administer an appropriate treatment so that we may breathe naturally in this atmosphere. I have to say, by the way, Doug Jones's elocution is always amazing. You can always hear every letter of what he says.
I love Doug Jones.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So the question I was wondering is, what did Dr. Pollard actually give them? And maybe we could get some clues to this. So this is my sort of trying to frame what could be happening there. Maybe we get some clues to this from what we see in terms of high altitude adaptations in real human populations. So for example, there's a lot of them studied in Ethiopia, in the Andes, and especially in Tibet. Now, what we see in those populations is that, the people have a higher lung volume, they have better blood flow of oxygen, blood carrying oxygen to the brain, and things like that. But what's cool about it is it's actually a genetic difference. It's actually inherited. Like you see this immediately from kids from the time that they're born. Now, recent work, and I say recent in this case, like about the last 10 years, so it's not so recent. Some of this, recent, yeah. Kind of. Some of this comes from a difference in a protein called EPAS1. I'm just going to call it EPAS1. And that's a gene that's turned on in low oxygen conditions. And this protein seems to be helping them adapt to that environment, which is pretty cool.
That is very cool.
There's others.
How long would it take? I mean, this question jumps out at me. How long would, well, here's the question, because we all know that people who don't have this adaptation, this mutation in their genes, when I, for example, go to the mountains, I get a little bit of altitude sickness. I'm a little dizzy. I have to drink a lot of water. I'm kind of tired, kind of spacey for a few days. So how many generations do you think it would take for, I mean, this is just a question that comes to me. If I moved to Tibet how many generations of Jayne's family would it take before this mutation appeared in a baby?
Oh, so that's a great question. So I'm going to answer it two different ways. So first of all, like there are things that we call adaptations in a conversational sense, not in a genetic sense, in that like just you living in that environment, you probably would have physiological changes that allow you to breathe better in that environment. So that would happen just for you in your current generation.
And what would those physiological changes be? Just learn to breathe more deeply?
Yeah. Some of it would be things like that, but some of it just your body would adapt to, or again, not in a genetic sense, but your body would just get used to that. And, it's kind of like we see runners often will train at high altitudes so they can do like really better places. Yeah. But what's interesting, so with respect to this EPAS1, it wasn't, at least it might not have been a new mutation that just arose in this human population. What's really cool is the variant that benefits the individuals in Tibet, I think is where it's been studied a lot, may have come from interbreeding with other non-human humanoids ancient times. So the Denisovan, so kind of, you've heard of Neanderthals, that's another ancient humanoid. Denisovan is another ancient humanoid that's been discovered a little bit more recently than Neanderthal. And apparently it looks like, since the gene sequence is very, very similar to the one we see in Denisovan remains, it looks like ancient interbreeding between humans and Denisovans helped them get this this particular variant.
How interesting.
Isn't that crazy?
So that's not called a different kind of human. I mean, Neanderthal, that's not, I didn't catch the word that you used, but
Denisovan. It's like, it's spelled like Dennis, the name, and then IVA, Denise, O-V-A-N, sorry.
O-V-O-V-A-N, Denisovan. So the Denisovan were not an early form of human. They were completely different species.
A separate lineage. Yeah. Separate lineage. Wow. Yeah. So a lot of modern humans have a little bit of Neanderthal ancestry, but a decent number of modern humans also have some Denisovan ancestry.
Oh, that's very cool. And I know there's others as well. I mean, I know other, wow, that is very cool.
Isn't that crazy? So with respect to Saru and Tilly, maybe what they're getting is an injection of the EPAS1 protein or some. I mean, again, I'm harping on this one protein. There's a whole bunch of other genes that have been implicated in this as well, but maybe this particular protein is something they got that just helped them be able to breathe in slightly lower oxygen conditions as they're walking across this planet. Seems reasonable.
That's very cool to think of. That's cool to think about.
Thank you.
You know how the science of Star Trek can be linked to our biology, biology here.
This connects back to our other episode too, in the context of other alien humanoids. Like, again, we have interbreeding among humanoids even here on Earth in the last couple 100,000 years.
So doesn't that lead, well, that might not lead us to the second question of symbiosis, but it kind of does, because I was going to ask you in terms of the symbiosis, with human and Trill. There's a couple of things about that. Has it shown up in Star Trek before?
Yes.
And how is it different this time?
Great questions.
And then how is it connected to symbiosis in general in the human experience?
Sure. So let's start with the Star Trek answer. We definitely have seen Trill before. I think it first showed up in Star Trek: The Next Generation, where a Trill showed up on the ship. Something happened. I can't remember what happened. Like the host was injured, and William Riker, who's Jonathan Frakes, had to take the symbiote into his body temporarily until a new Trill host came back. So that was, again, sort of the human holding a Trill host. Now, in his case, in the case of Riker, he actually did get the previous host's memories and things, and he knew everything that the symbiote had experienced before. That seems not to be happening with respect to the character in episode 3, Adira, I think was her name.
Adira, Admiral Tall is the memories that she
exactly. So for some reason she's not connecting yet. Yeah, but maybe there's some, there may be some difference among different humans. There's within our species, there may be some difference in terms of how well you can link up with these with the slug symbionts. But we see them there, and then of course Deep Space Nine had a main character, Dax, who actually went through 2 different hosts through the series as well. So
that's cool.
So
it makes me think about, could it be connected with age as well? Because Adira is very, very young, and how much of Admiral Tall's memory could she compute with a less experience in life? But that's a psychological thing, not a biological.
Never
So
know.
talking about symbiosis,
Yeah. So symbiosis
not
are
that
like
much I know. Yeah. Tell us about that, because I think about like bacteria live all in us and we benefit from it.
and
I
that's
don't
a
know if that's
huge one.
symbiosis. Is
That
that okay? Because
absolutely
that's what
is.
comes to my mind. I'm like, there's a whole bunch of organisms living inside of us and I wouldn't be alive without them. So it must be
Absolutely right.
symbiotic, right?
That's
Okay.
absolutely right, and it's because it benefits them as well. That's like if they
Right.
were hurting you, it'd be parasitic
Right.
since it's
Right. Right.
benefiting them.
Right.
But I mean, these are super common. Like you said, like we have trillions of microbes in our body, and like you can think of your body almost like an ecosystem
It's
of
just so
all these
weird to think about. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there's better awareness of this. Like you probably remember, like when you and I were kids, like people would just take antibiotics for anything, and now there's much more awareness that we want probiotics. Like
Well,
probiotics weren't a thing
probiotics.
in like the 80s and stuff
No.
like that. But we know about the good ones, and this is true not just for us. So I did a sabbatical at the University of California at Berkeley in a lab that works on mice. And one of the things they have there to study microbiomes, they have these germ-free mice that you can order. They are not happy. Let me say that. These are not happy mice. They don't want to be germ.
How can you tell that? Are they just like
They are very clearly very sickly.
Oh, very sickly.
Yeah.
Because they took all the
probiotics
bacteria out of
basically
them?
exactly.
Really?
All the probiotics are removed in there. So clearly that's not good. And we know from plants, we know about nitrogen fixing bacteria. That's one of the essential things for allowing plants to live. That's where they get a lot of their nutrients and stuff. So I mean, it's everywhere. But let me tell you a crazy story.
Okay. Oh, good.
There is so across arthropods, so this includes insects, but let's focus on insects. Something like 70 or 80% of insect species are infected by this particular bacteria that's called Wolbachia. It's Wolbachia. Okay, Wolbachia. Okay. They are very interesting. They affect a lot about the host. They affect sometimes their behavior. They affect, just all sorts of physiological things in the host, and they live inside their cells. They're actually transmitted from mothers to eggs, so it's passed on vertically as well. And obviously, occasionally it can cross over, but mostly it's transmitted vertically. What's interesting is that in many insect species, if an uninfected female mates with an infected male, they get no offspring. An uninfected female with an infected male, they get no offspring. So in that sense, for females, it's actually better to be infected than uninfected because you can have offspring with anybody, right? So that creates an interesting evolutionary dynamic, because then once an infection is introduced into a population, it spreads crazy fast, like crazy fast. Like, so people have done these like artificial things where they'll add it to a population, and literally in like hundreds of days, the population goes from none to like everybody has it.
Well, how do you get a female who doesn't have it? If everybody, does it
be
mean that she
cured.
can't have any? Does it mean she can't have any offspring
Well,
ever,
no.
or she can only have offspring with a male who does not have it?
Exactly.
I see. And
That's
good luck
exactly
finding that. Right.
Well, it depends.
Right.
So in early stages, it works out okay. But then once a lot of the males have it, there's a huge advantage to the females carrying it, right?
Right.
So
it almost becomes part of the species. Like it almost becomes a definition. It affects their behavior, but that behavior actually becomes the species itself.
Yeah. No, and so sometimes what ends up happening is when you can have different strains of Wolbachia infect different members of the species, and it's almost like creating different species because now they're no longer reproductively compatible.
Is that right?
Isn't that crazy? But
what does it do for the species? What does it allow them to do? What's the benefit to this?
I'm not sure if there's a direct benefit beyond that incompatibility thing that it creates. Yeah. Which basically just makes it so that essentially once it's already in, there's a benefit to having it.
And you can't tell, the insects can't tell who has it and who doesn't.
So people have looked for that, and then there hasn't been good evidence that they can do that. But what's interesting is that people are leveraging this now with mosquitoes. So some mosquitoes don't automatically have this. What's interesting is you can introduce this into a mosquito population and it'll spread super fast. But what's crazy is the mosquitoes who get this Wolbachia infection no longer transmit things like dengue fever and stuff like that.
Is that right? So they'll produce more offspring, but they won't be dangerous to humans.
Exactly. So
more mosquitoes, less disease.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily even more mosquitoes. It's basically just replacing the mosquito population. Yeah, so they
Why
did this
haven't
as
they done that? Have they done that?
They are. So they did a test run in the about 10 years, a little bit less than 10 years ago in Australia. And that's the one I was referring to. And I mentioned that like I saw the figure on this, and it has like from day 0 to day 100 of like going from 0% Wolbachia infected to 100% Wolbachia infected. Wow. So it's crazy. So now what they're doing is they're introducing it in Vietnam and places like that, which have like high incidence of, dengue fever and chikungunya and all those diseases. And it seems to be working. It seems to be like you see in the populations that are getting it, the fraction of people in the population who get these diseases is plummeting. So,
but here's my question, because as you say that, I feel like biology is like a jack in the box.
Yes.
Like this head gets pushed down. So
yes.
What is going to pop up?
It's possible. It's possible. So it hasn't popped up yet. I mean, I know we have examples of biological control that have gone bad. Like the classic one that people talk about is cane toads being introduced in Australia, which those were introduced to like get rid of this cane grub. They basically didn't do anything to the grub and they went crazy and displaced a lot of the native fauna.
They didn't fix the problem that they were introduced for, but then they just took over.
Yep.
So that's happened with, I know that this is possibly not deadly, but I know all over California where I live, there's eucalyptus, which was introduced because they thought it would be a fast growing wood that they could use for building. And it was a terrible wood, doesn't work, falls apart. So there's just eucalyptus everywhere and they fall and, they can't be used. Anyway, although I like my eucalyptus, so I'm not going to complain.
But back to the episode.
Anything,
back to the episode. It was cool just seeing that and seeing the sort of specificity that this symbiote works. It seems to work very reliably when it's inserted into other trill. It seems to work now, at least not consistently when it's inserted to humans. And that seems to be true. That a lot of these symbioses are kind of specific. That this thing can. I'm going to say infect, and I don't necessarily mean it in a bad way, but I mean, can symbiote.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a real word.
So we've talked about how humans in real life here on Earth, the biology of symbiosis with all the bacteria that are inside of us. Is it possible, but Star Trek takes it to, obviously a larger degree. So you've got this trill. Mm-hmm. What's your imagination for here on Earth, the biology of humans having a symbiotic relationship with, I don't know, something, I mean, not a lion, but something
large as opposed to microbes.
Larger, yeah.
I mean, to some extent, it doesn't have to live on us to have a symbiotic relationship with us, right?
Oh, okay. Okay. That's a good point. Actually, life is symbiotic, to tell you the truth. All of life is symbiotic.
Yeah. We
all depend, that whole thing about, what is that thing that a few years, you blow on a feather over here and over there. There's whatever that thing was. But actually, symbiosis is the definition of life. We've solved it here, Mohamed.
There you go.
Because when you think about it, but so
it is funny to think of like what the history is in terms of the trill, though. Like, how did that relationship first start? Like, I'm assuming that the first humanoid trill didn't have the slug inside their gut. Like, were the slugs just like swimming around a pool, and like a human was swimming in the pool, and it like attached on like a leech.
Right.
And all of a sudden there are these memories.
Right.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah. How did that happen?
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe one day they'll write
about
it. Yeah. That's funny. Way before Star Trek started, they had that first one.
There you go.
But the other thing that struck me, and you might not have much to say about this, but as we were watching episode 3 and they, they go to the academy and there's this huge tree. I just had this thought, oh my God, that is such a wide tree. And I've been in California in the north. I've been around the sequoias and the redwoods. And I've even stood in the one that people used to drive their car through. But obviously the Star Trek one was just, gorgeously wide. And I thought, I wonder if an organism can get that wide and survive. I don't know. I just thought I'm going to ask Mohamed.
Yeah, a lot of them do get that. Like you mentioned, redwood, sequoia. I mean, there's some pine and cypress that can get that old as well. I'm not sure about the width on those, but
they can get that old. But that seemed even bigger than anything we've ever seen.
It was fat. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it was fatter than something you could drive a car through.
Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it just seemed like it was. But it was a great tree.
I don't know. Do you have any insights? Like, do you think that was physically there or physically someplace so they actually filmed it, or do you think it was like a CGI, a green
Well,
screen?
I think that it looked as if they did film in, in a real situation, but they may have just had, I think it would actually have been harder to have a real tree because you have to cover it in green screen. So they might have just had I don't know. I wonder how they did that.
I was wondering about that. I tried to Google it, but
that's
I didn't see anything.
that's a good question, because maybe they just had a big green screen and the whole background was created. Maybe they just had the green lawn walking up to a green screen. And then, once again, like we talked about last time, the X on the green screen here, this huge tree is going to be here, and you stand there and you stand there. And that's how wide the tree is. And
but Nilsson was like sitting on something too. So they would have to have added something else as well, but maybe it was a green seat.
Well, they do that. They can put a little box, they can put a little box and a green cloth can be wrapped over, can be floated over things.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, so I have some questions for you now. Speaking of these
you do. Okay.
Yeah, I do. So episode 2, poor Kayla Detmer. She had a very, very serious tumble. And this was before even they were showing the scenes with her, like, being a little confused. I remember that fall she did, like she was just thrown over that console.
Right. That was violent.
That was very violent. So I'm assuming that wasn't Emily Coots, but a stunt double or something like that. And I'm curious, like, what's your, have you had to work with stunt doubles?
I'm assuming that particular stunt, if it's like that big of a stunt, I'm assuming it wasn't Emily. I mean, it's funny because in the old days, it used to be the manly thing to do your own stunts. Like you hear of old movies and you hear of things like, this won't be correct, but you hear like Paul Newman wanted to jump from the top of moving train cars, one to the other, and you're like, he did it himself. But I think as the world became more litigious, and studios were like, maybe not a good idea to lose our star, they started to become more careful about actors doing their own stunts. So actors will do their own stunts. And of course, amazing Michelle Yeoh will. Who's gonna be a stunt for Michelle Yeoh, a stunt woman for Michelle Yeoh? Nobody. But I think that when it's really violent, or there is a possibility of harm, they like to have the stunt woman standing by. It's sometimes a negotiation between the director and the producers and the actor. Like the actor would say, I really, really want to try it. Like when in episode 8 of season 1, when Cornwell and Laurel have that big fight, we choreographed the whole thing ourselves. And there's that point when Mary, takes me, and of course there would have been all sorts of cables underneath the uniform, but Kate takes me and boom, up against the wall. And I was totally willing to do it all, but at the last minute when they shoved me up against the wall, there was the special effect of the sparks flying. And, they were like, Jayne, you can do the fight up until then, and we're not really comfortable with the sparks flying all over you. I was like, I'm fine if you want, but
I'm glad you didn't do it and get hurt.
Yeah. But so stunt, that's always a negotiation.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's probably.
But they have a stunt woman always standing by, for things like that.
They couldn't see. I'm assuming you couldn't CGI that. That would be pretty intense.
That would be really intense, I think. I mean, there are certain things they CGI, but they wouldn't need to because they have such good stunt people that can put on a wig I mean, we'll have to find out. Maybe if I see Emily, she'd say, how dare you? I did all that myself, of course. But they can also make something look more violent with the camera, probably.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Actually, along those lines, when the ship shakes, is it just the camera shaking, or is it actually the ship shaking?
Camera, probably. I mean, there have been. I was not on a set where I have heard of sets being put on. I don't know what they're put on, something where the whole ththing shakes. But usually they just tell us, okay, you're going to the right, you're going to the left, and everybody has to do it at the same time.
That's gotta
Jonathan
be awkward.
Frakes would love yelling out. He'd be like, 1, 2, 3, left, 1, 2, 3, right, Anyway, yeah.
That's awesome. So other question I have with you, I was thinking about this one in the third episode. There was a scene there where Mira, Giorgio, and Mike, I guess we just say Giorgio from now.
Yeah,
Where
Giorgio,
Giorgio and
yeah.
Michael were walking down the hall. And it was kind of a long chat. And it was a really moving scene, but I actually had a more technical question about it. Now I remember Garrett Wong and Robbie McNeil in their podcast commented about these sort of walk-in talks that they would do in Star Trek Voyager. And they said that it was tough to do because you had to have the timing just right, because these corridors aren't that long. You're not actually on a spaceship.
Right.
Yeah. So how does that work? Like, now that was true in the 90s. I don't know. Maybe now, I mean, obviously.
No, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It is really hard. And what the technical thing that you do is start from the end and then say all the lines backwards and walk at the pace that you feel like walking. And then you walk right off the set and you're like, oh God, I'm going to have to do something. The thing that's difficult is if there's not an adaptation made for the urgency of the scene and you don't have enough room. So the audience is going to see if the actors are walking like really slowly, but they're supposed to be saying something very urgent, it just doesn't match. It just doesn't go together. So you have to find an organic reason to be walking, and then,
one
stop.
Of them splits off, yeah.
Well, or just stop and really make your point to someone for a second and then get frustrated and move on. But you have to find ways to it's really choreography. But it's funny that similar things strike us from the biology point of view and the
right,
production actor point of view, because I remember that walk and talk as well. And sometimes when I watch actors, not necessarily that scene, but any walk and talk in any movie or TV show, I think I instinctively pace it. I instinctively am thinking, oh God, are they running out of room? Are they slowing up unnaturally? Or sometimes you'll find someone who does it like so well. And you think, wow, they really made that natural, even though the corridor is not long enough.
I think in that one, Giorgio continued walking and Michael stopped, but the camera stayed with Michael. So Giorgio may just walk right off.
Right. They were able to finish the words and then she left. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So that's cool.
Any further thoughts?
I always, when I'm watching, like I always end up looking at acting moments and just loving, like, this is so funny, but I Sonequa with what I call her flip phone, but the moment when she sees the Discovery crew, before she's with them in person, but she's looking at her, and I joke that I had her flip phone because it is kind of like
it is that style.
And the actor is just looking at a piece of plastic, but it was just so great how she just embodied the emotion of seeing those people and they're alive. Oh, yeah. And I loved when they finally took the fake head off of Wen. He was those are two kind of very random moments to bring up. I like everybody, but I always love Michelle and everybody. I love seeing everybody.
The fake head thing was interesting because I remember I've seen this in various podcasts as well since that time too. But I was definitely thinking, like, what if he couldn't breathe? You don't know what was underneath there.
What if the actor couldn't breathe?
No, not the actor. Because they thought it was an alien.
Oh,
right. They pulled this helmet just off him.
They could have just been like, "Oh, sorry,
we just killed him."
Let's like Monty Python, sorry, let's put that back on.
Exactly. So much for that treaty.
Right. That's true. I was thinking they knew he was human underneath, but you're right. Yeah. But that was good because I really thought, God, this guy has really suffered, Yeah.
My son Adam definitely liked the helmet a lot. He was like, "That's really cool."
Put it back on. Yeah, your son's like, "Put it back on.
Yeah,
put it back on."
He's like, "I want one of those."
Guy. Yeah. But yeah, so I look forward to seeing what more they bring and learning more of the biology. I think it's really fun too. I'm getting a lesson in all of this, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm getting a lot of lessons too.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to everybody for tuning into our show.
Thank you.
That concludes this episode of BioTrekkie with the Admiral. Tune in next time and live long and prosper.
Bye-bye. Gotta do that. Sorry.